We have talked a little bit about the police today. I'm not seeing any uniforms around. Oh, there, good. It's a plainclothes police person, good. And of course the police are often the first responders. So Sergeant Natasha Powles has had first-hand experience of many family violence incidents, and her role now is as family violence advisor for the Metro Northwest area, and she's going to share some of her thoughts on how collaboration with police can result in better outcomes for family violence victims. So welcome, Natasha.
Hello everybody. I don't quite know how to follow that, my goodness. So I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, their elders past and present, and any community members that are here with us today. That's such a confronting story, Christine, and I'm so sorry on behalf of Victoria Police that we couldn't do more, and I hope that we're doing better than we have done in the past. And I think that the way that we're set up now, and we operate under a code of practice for the investigation of family violence that's quite stringent in terms of its governance structure on what police must do in this space, thinking about separating parties when they're asking questions like that. So I hope that we're doing better than we have done in the past. I wanted to speak about the Code of Practice for the Investigation of Family Violence because it is an important document and it's publicly available, and it's publicly available to all of you so that you know what we're supposed to do in this space when we go to an initial family violence incident. You can access it on our Victoria Police website, and I encourage you to do that because I think it's important that you all understand how we make the decisions that we make in this space and why. So we all know that family violence is such a significant issue in Victoria and across Australia, and indeed across the world. In the 2014-15 financial year, Victoria Police responded to over 75,000 incidents of family violence that were reported. We also know, though, that half of all victims of family violence have never contacted the police. It takes the average victim, so I'm told, between 3 and 7 experiences of violence before they'll report to police. But when police do attend a family violence incident, they compile a family violence risk assessment report. It used to be called an L17, which is a term that is common in the sector, so you may have heard that terminology. Police document their risk assessment. It's a risk assessment drawn from the CRAF, so the questions that we're taught to ask a victim are the Common Risk Assessment Framework questions. It's designed to be a comprehensive risk assessment on the known risk indicators, and the answers to that dictate the police response to the incident. As you all know, all agencies in the family violence sector use the CRAF to assess the risk to children and victims of family violence, ensuring that when we're speaking about different risk indicators, it's consistent, that our approaches and our questions and our answers are consistent. Essentially, when police attend an incident, we've got 3 options to take as a result of that attendance. The pursuit of criminal charges, which is all around holding the perpetrator to account for his actions. The pursuit of civil process, so an intervention order application, which is about assessing that family violence has occurred, so identifying that it's occurred and that it's likely to reoccur within that relationship, and obviously aiming to put some process in place to keep victims safe. The intervention order comes in many forms, and you'll hear it talked about as a family violence safety notice or an application and warrant for an intervention order. There's application and summons. So there's a lot of different process that we use, but essentially they're all an intervention order of some type. The third option is just to make a referral to a specialist family violence service. So we can use a combination of those 3 options, all of them or one of them. We will always do an informal, at the very least, an informal referral to a specialist service, which is literally just informing the woman and the perpetrator and children about services that are available. Obviously, you know, if depending on the severity of the incident, we often do formal referrals into a service. We don't need consent for those, but we do need to notify the parties that we're making those referrals on their behalf. So essentially, frontline units, the local divisional van, attend and compile a report, so those of that incident. They assess the risk using the CRAF, they determine the most appropriate action and whatever of those 3 options they're going to use at that as a result of that incident. Each 24-hour police station across the state has a sergeant with a portfolio, essentially, of a family violence liaison officer. So they're a contact point within the police station. They will give specific advice to members who have attended incidents on the appropriate response that's required of them. They're a contact point for a local specialist service as well, so operating in their area, and I encourage you to go and find out who your family violence liaison officer is in each of your police stations and introduce yourself to them in your role. There's also family violence units or family violence teams set up across the state, and their role is to triage all family violence incidents that have occurred in their police service area, ensuring that appropriate action's been taken, contacting high-risk victims to see if further disclosures weren't made at the time or can be sort of gained by having conversations with them. And they deal with high-risk recidivist victims and perpetrators. So in a more intense manner, we will target high-risk recidivist, so recidivist basically just means they've had multiple incidents. We'll target high-risk perpetrators and engage with victims and try and get their support or get them into a supported service pathway. There's also family violence court liaison officers who sit in the magistrates court across the state and deal with victims where police have initiated an application for an intervention order. So they'll help tailor those conditions. Again, try and get them to re-engage with services, both for the perpetrator and for the victim. And then there's a family violence advisor, and my role, we're across the state as well, is to ensure that strategically we're doing everything that we can across the state and identifying any systemic issues that are occurring, ensuring that we're integrating our services as best as we can and looking at better ways of doing business, essentially. So I guess from my perspective for you guys, your best point of contact for high risk or significantly vulnerable family violence victims that you're working with is to either engage with the family violence team, so find out who that family violence team is, contact your family violence liaison officer and identify who your family violence team is, where they work from. You'll find that, say for instance in Bendigo, there's a Bendigo family violence team, there's one here in Melbourne that operates and manages, would respond to nearly all the hospitals sitting in the CBD. But introduce yourself to that local family violence unit, have that conversation about the victim that you're dealing with and seek their advice on the best way to report that to the police, and you'll find you'll end up with a better outcome for both the victim and, I guess, for managing that risk onto another service. And I just wanted to finish by telling you a story as well, just from my own experience, I guess. It's the story of Megan, and I want to tell it because it highlights to me the capacity we have to respond to a person's life and to have a real impact on improving outcomes for them when a number of services across different sectors work together toward a common goal. Megan was a woman I worked with a number of years ago when I was in a family violence unit. She was raised in a volatile home where family violence occurred regularly. It's very likely Megan experienced sexual assault, although she never personally disclosed it to me. At the time I met Megan, she had a 16-year-old daughter, a child she'd given birth to at a young age. She'd raised her daughter Jess as a single mum, and Jess was relatively well adjusted as an adolescent girl, though at the point when I started to engage with Megan, Jess was just starting to act out. I don't know if Jess was responding to the violence that was occurring that her mother was experiencing at that time. Megan was referred to me in the family violence unit because of a recent spike in reported family violence perpetrated by her boyfriend Matt. Matt and Megan had a 6-month-old baby at that time, and the physical violence in Megan and Matt's relationship started during pregnancy. They'd been together for a short time when Megan fell pregnant, and Megan and Matt had met through the use of marijuana, using marijuana together in the DHS flats with other neighbours and associates where Megan lived. Matt introduced the drug ice to Megan. Megan had always used marijuana. She had been diagnosed with bipolar and had, for her adult life, been fairly stable with medication, and then on an ongoing basis supplemented those prescription medications with marijuana use. But when Megan and Matt met, they used ice together fairly regularly, and Megan's life started a downward spiral from that point. Because of the family violence reported to police, Child Protection became involved in Megan's life. An intervention order was taken out and Matt was excluded from the house. During that time, Megan really tried to get clean. She went into detox. She was a terrific, really caring mother when she wasn't affected by substances, and I saw that firsthand time and time again. She did a stint in detox, and while she was away, she had Matt come back into the home and look after her son, change the intervention order because she had no other support, so he came back into the home during that time. And then when she was released from detox, that family violence sort of continued. ICE became a real focus for them. DHS intervened and took the baby and placed the baby into kinship care. We intervened, and Matt was incarcerated. So Megan was left at home, in her mind, just in despair, really. She was in a really bad place at that point in time. So for the next few weeks, Megan, who'd lost her child, her partner and her ice supplier, wasn't coping. She continually came to the attention of emergency services. She presented to ED regularly, like multiple times a day. She attended police stations constantly begging to see Matt, who was on remand. And she started to really engage in risk-taking behaviour to draw the attention of services, in my view. She was running around her streets naked. She'd jump on the roof and pretend that she was going to sort of suicidal ideation. She was intentionally flooding her house constantly. She was intentionally setting things on the stove alight. Police were called, ambos were called, CFA were called, PACE units responded. I don't know if you know what they are, but I haven't got time to explain them. But she did end up spending short periods of time as an involuntary patient in psychiatric care. But her diagnosis was sort of around borderline personality disorder and drug-induced psychosis. And I think the system really struggled to cope with her in that state. Eventually, she burned her house down and the fire impacted her neighbour's home and put their lives at risk. So she was arrested, charged and remanded in custody. She was hospitalised in a psych ward while she was awaiting trial. During her remand, the services who'd been trying to get her sort of back on track and support her in this sort of journey came together. Police, mental health, drug and alcohol services, corrections, child protection, the CFA, housing, emergency department staff, her lawyer. We all met a number of times. We formulated a plan to help Megan. We consulted with her in prison. We arranged housing for her to move back into that she couldn't damage, concrete walls, no bath, an electric stove instead of a gas stove, just simple things that really changed her ability to really do damage to herself, essentially. We engaged with the Drug and Alcohol Service and set up mental health plans for her release and really commenced a process for reuniting her with her son, which was a big buy-in from Megan. And we also set up a number of supports within the community for her. So essentially we worked as a team, each bringing to the table the best way forward from our own perspectives, identifying the best way to help Megan get back to being Megan. And I am pleased to say that I checked on Megan before coming here today. She's doing really well. She's not had another family violence incident reported since her release. I think the expiration of her intervention order is now 2060. She's reunited with her son. She went to court and was found guilty of offending, but we managed to get that without conviction. Her mental health plan is working and she's reunited with her son and her life is really back on track. But I think that this highlights to me that the partnerships that came together as an integrated response to Megan have been the driving force for her getting her life back on track. That and hard work from Megan. And I think that the services that struggled to respond to Megan's behaviours for that period of time when she was really acting out were impacted also by their ability to respond to others in the community during that time. So it's clear that having a strengthened system for coming together was integral in the ability to understand what was best for Megan. It was also the best outcome for each of our collective services who were then able to be available for other emergencies, so our capacity wasn't limited to the same extent. This coordinated, informed response had a real impact on improving the outcomes for Megan. And this is the benefit I see in strengthening the responses to family violence in the hospital setting, because I think if we work together, we can just achieve those much, much better outcomes. Thank you.